Hello, my name is Mark and welcome to I Am Organic Gardening. I'm located in the state of New Jersey in Zone 7A. And today I want to go over tomatoes and we're going to go look at them in a little bit. Now, my tomato plants have only been out here for like the last, say, 2.5 months. We planted them later due to cold temperatures, and then it got extremely hot. So what do our tomato plants need from us right now? And I want to document this and show you the example that I'm going to give you as evidence that it's going to be better to explain when you see it. This is something that everybody has disagreed with and just makes fun of it, and you have to prune all these tomatoes all the time, and you have to do this, that, the other thing. It's really quite simple. They are an easy plant to grow, and I'm an organic farmer, so labor cost to me is always something that I'm trying to reduce all the time to get a better product. I want to give the best product to my customers, but also when you're in the garden, you want the best product for you to reward yourself from being out there and doing all this work. But today we're going to talk about a little bit overcrowding. And when it comes down to it, this was just by mistake, and I will explain to you when we see the tomato plants how this mistake is proving a point to you all about nutrients, water, growth of the tomato plant, temperature, sunlight, everything. It all plays into one thing, is that these plants, tomato plants specifically, that's what we're talking about, can just be happy when they get a good amount of water. And that's the key thing. But there's also a secret that goes with that amount of water and how healthy the soil is. I grow in sand, silt, and clay. Other people might grow in peat moss or coconut coir. The whole thing, the key thing is water, and I want to show you why. And this is a perfect example. I'm glad it was a mistake this year, and then I can show you I wasn't counting on this, but I want to document this. So when people come back to me for advice, I can show this video and say, look at this. This is something that you see with your own eyes. We kind of have to believe what we see with our eyes, but I'm making this too long. Let's go look at those tomato plants. So we're going to specifically kind of talk about this one tomato plant here. You can see the main tomato plant, that's the highest on this trellis. I don't stake individual tomato plants. I grow them on a cattle panel and I weave them in and out. This is less tying and putting stakes per se. I've had this trellis in the ground for 5 years. This is the 5th year right now that I'm growing tomato plants in the same spot. One key thing I always do, I always grow a cover crop. I mulch in the springtime and kill the cover crop off, and I leave the roots of that old tomato plant. This tomato plant you see here, I leave those roots in the ground. I do not remove the roots or disturb the soil. I want healthy microbes in the future there. What we're going to do, I'm going to go on the other side. This is way that you can see something better in the sunlight here. The sun's just coming up, it's early in the morning. All this foliage you see here is not from this tomato plant. There's a lot of volunteer tomato plants growing here. It's not suckers from this tomato plant, but there's a lot of volunteers, and it's even more on the other side. So let's go on the other side of this tomato plant. It's starting to get windy out. Hopefully you can hear me very well. And I want to show you how many tomato plants are growing that are volunteer tomato plants from leftover seeds from last year that grew on their own in the soil. So when I grow a cover crop, I usually grow it just within a foot of the trellis, and then I put leaf mold down, and then I can do is take the leaf mold here, you can see, and throw it on top of the cover crop to kill it off and then plant. So this year I did something different. I killed the cover crop off by just cutting it down, leaving the roots in the ground. Now I pulled this mulch back because the soil was too cold early springtime, and it was getting, let's say, maybe a lack of water because of all this mulch that I have here. I put leaves about a foot thick. So I removed from the trellis here backwards about 2 feet. To my surprise, all the foliage you see here, and we're going to cut a couple things out of the way here, this one tomato plant is trying to survive, but there's got to be probably 50 other tomato plants that are volunteer tomato plants. And let's get a close-up of how healthy everything is. And that's my one key thing I want to show you, how healthy everything is when you have the right amount of water. Look at the health of all these plants. Now, it rains like 5 days out of 7 days a week, and it's humid out. There's no disease on them. There's even some other weeds in there that are growing. This is insane, but it just goes to show you, if you have healthy soil and a good amount of water, even excess water, you can get this result. This is amazing. There's no disease on the plants. There might even be a couple different varieties I see in there. I have some beefsteaks growing in there. I have some cherry tomatoes that might even be sun gold that I planted 2 or 3 years ago on this trellis. It's just a combination of everything. So I want to go down below here and cut a couple of these tomato plants out and explain why water is such a key factor in your garden, especially when it comes to tomato plants. Tomato plants love water. Let's show you an example here. Let me get down here on my knees. Now this here, I have a sponge here and I want to show you something. This is a volunteer plant. It goes way back to the main stem here. Let's see, let's get here. This is something that's growing right here in the ground. This is a volunteer plant and all this. So I want to show you an example. Let's cut this tomato off. Now, this sponge here, if I put a hole in here and take this tomato plant and put it in the sponge, like so, this tomato plant will grow. Why will it grow? Because as long as it has water, it's giving at least 50 to 60% of its needs. The other need is sunlight and temperature. So if it has those a couple things, and it needs a little bit of nutrients, only 5% nutrients of this value. So if you have this whole sponge filled with water all the time, with air in there too, that's another key thing, this tomato plant will grow. And that's what all this soil is doing. It has a huge amount of rain this year, and everything was going very well. And that's where all these are taking off. And you can see here, let me pull this one out. That's a pretty good root system for a volunteer tomato plant. And you can see all these tomato plants, let me get a close-up for you, that's there. Now there's probably at least maybe 1 or 2 tomatoes that fell on the ground last year, and you can see how they all rooted together. That's the root ball right there. And there's at least a dozen small to large tomato plants growing in this area. It is amazing. The leaves do not have any disease on it. There's plenty of nitrogen there. There's plenty of phosphorus, potassium, all the minerals that it needs. And another key point, if you don't have water available, all those nutrients in the ground, no matter what soil you're using, whether I call it artificial soil or sand, silt, and clay, it's not going to travel from the root system in your tomato plant. Water is the delivery system. The nutrients in the ground have to get up to the top. The other thing that water is doing is cooling the plant down when it gets too hot and stressful. There's not leaf curl on this, and leaf curl is due to stress. A lot of people, and this is what I'm trying to point out, it's not so much the nutrients value of something. The roots have to not be large, not be small, and you really can't tell what's going on, especially with these roots here. Now we have this cluster of roots, and there's so many plants. Are they competing? This is what I'm trying to say. They're not competing per se, maybe only 10% from being overcrowded. But if you have enough, that's the key. If you have enough water and enough nutrients, it can grow. There's going to be some that lag behind and some that grow thicker. You can see some thicker stems on the back here or something like that. Let's see if I can get a better picture for you. And there's some skinny stems there. The difference is probably the amount of sunlight and just genetics of that one seed that grows something bigger. Just like trees in the forest, eventually the smaller trees will die off. But if you have plenty of water, and that's what tomato plants want, is water. They want it to cool themselves down, and they want to bring nutrients from the ground upwards. Now, I don't use any type of fertilizer. I do put a handful of worm casting in on my tomato plants, but these tomato plants, I put nothing down for them, and they're growing just fine. Now, worm castings I use to increase the microbiology, or the, let's say, all the microbes in the soil, because that's what worm castings have in there. Because I'm opening up the soil and putting a plant in the soil, and I don't want it to go into shock, so I add some worm castings, and it's available. In case we get cloudy days, worm castings is the only one of the many few things that actually have nutrients available. It doesn't have to go through a microbe process. Now, with these tomato plants in mind, that is just amazing. So we got a dozen plants there, and I'm going to go around the whole thing, and I just want to clean up this plant. I might have to show you in a different video how I cleaned up everything. And now I have some time. I'm not traveling as much and talking to other farmers, but you can see here how well established this is. Again, this is the main plant up on top here. And then I have all these volunteer plants going on there. I'm repeating myself. There's no disease problems. There's no problem due to overcrowding. Look at the size of this one plant here. All these volunteers plants came up that the seed survives over winter with a foot of mulch on top, have enough nutrients in the ground. So that's another key thing I like to show you on my channel, that it's building soil is your answer. Building soil with microbes is your answer. Adding fertilizer every year doesn't really do anything unless you are growing in peat moss or coconut coir with vermiculite, or even add sand in there. This is all done by nature, and that's the way it works. It's green, it's lush, it's thick. Everything is there that you need. So all these other tips that you're seeing, listen, you got to try to follow some of them. It's not the end of the world. You learn as you go along. But the key thing is, here's something that I want you to think about, because also, here's another thing. This plant here is very important, and all the other plants below it. This plant is feeding the soil. It's taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, pushing it back down the soil. The leaves are taking in carbon under the side or on top of the plant too, depending on the wind. Now, they will send exudates down into the soil and feed that microbiology. It's not about just compost. It's about feeding the soil carbon, and that is the currency that is put in the soil all the time down below here, that you can see how lush and green these plants are. There's even some velvet weed growing over here too, which is a deeper taproot, and I will not pull this out. I just pulled that out for example, but I will just cut all this down, leaving the main stem on top. Now, a lot of people also too, you got to remove bottom foliage. You can see here all this foliage on the ground. Is it a disease problem? No. There's even a couple small tomatoes I see there. They're probably like maybe the sun gold or cherry tomatoes I had in the past that I grew over the years, the last 5 years here. They're doing fine. And again, we've had the worst weather. High temperatures, which tomatoes don't like, and like we're talking 95. We hit a record of 103 maybe 2 weeks ago, you know, and it was insane. But we've had plenty of moisture. That moisture is going to, again, bring up the nutrients it needs and not make that plant suffer. If that plant did not have the amount of water that it did, I'm sure there would be disease problems. So that's another way to convince yourself that watering is important. Now, I know a lot of people grow in raised beds and buckets and they dry out very quickly. That's the downside to it, but you can solve it by putting water in the ground. You're not going to overdo it. And if your plants seem like they're suffering from overdoing it, then your soil is too compact, because when you have good aerated soil from a cover crop or tomato roots in the ground, they're putting oxygen back in the ground also too. And that's the key thing. They're separating all those pieces of aggregates below or soil particles, and they're letting air in. When the water goes down into your soil, basically what it's doing is pushing the air also down. If this is the air on top and this is your other soil below and the water's pulling it down, it's pulling the air. It's the same thing. Water goes down in the soil, it's pulling air back in the soil. And this, maybe my sponge again, this is compact soil. There's no air in there. You need your soil to expand, and that's why you can grow a tomato plant in sponge or a rock wool or anything else either. That's what they do in the greenhouses. Now, everybody has different pruning techniques based on where they grow it. In a greenhouse, you will not ever see something like this ever grown. They want one stem coming up, going as high as possible, because they are costing their product per square foot. I don't have to worry about that because I have enough land, and I also don't have to worry about watering because I'm capturing all that water because I have roots in the ground, and also holding that moisture in and keeping my soil temperature cool by mulch on the ground. I'm going to give you another perfect example. Behind me I have a hedgerow of sunflowers. These are all volunteer sunflowers that I planted last year, went to seed, and I use this as a hedgerow or a wind barrier to keep my garden from not getting so beat up the winds. I have a lot of winds on my property. I'm 6'4". Over here you can see that they're at least 7 to 8 feet tall, and some even 9 foot, like that one. Now, they received a lot of water this year. They're overcrowded, but again, another perfect example. Water is a solution or a benefit when you have a good amount of water, that your vegetables will grow much bigger. It is one of the key things. Your plant is made up of really two things. 95% of your plants are made up of water and carbon. 5% is only nutrients, and most of those nutrients is nitrogen. So you want to give that plant as much sunlight to get that carbon out of the atmosphere and push it in the ground to feed the microbes, and the microbes feed your plant, and you want to give it an amount of water. That's the key to organic gardening. Those microbes are working with you, and they know how valuable that is, and they've been doing this from day one, from the start. It's a beautiful process, and your garden will flourish and you'll be happy. And the key thing I want to point out, when you have all these things working for you, you get the most nutrient dense vegetables that you can possibly ever have. There's research being done. When you grow something organically, let's say a tomato, you would have to eat, say, 5 or 6 greenhouse tomatoes to get the same nutrient density in one tomato that's growing outside organically. And they've been testing it, and there's research on it, but they need to go further. I want to thank you so very much for watching. Give it a good thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and again, grow nutrient dense food organically in your garden. Have fun gardening. Everybody's enjoying it immensely. Don't get discouraged. It's something that we learn over time. I've been doing this probably for 40 years now. So enjoy it and have a great time, and I'll see you again with another exciting video. Thanks for your time. Enjoy. Happy gardening.